Spoilers ahead for the first 10 seasons of The Walking Dead. You have been warned. The Walking Dead and YouTube video essays are usually few and far between, but I'm not sure what it is about the show, but for every Star Wars, Game of Thrones or MCU essay analysing character, plot or theme, there's nothing to show for The Walking Dead, which, despite what many will tell you, there's still very much a successful franchise across its 3 shows with many others on the way, games, apps, books, comics and merchandise, and it's still very much in the cultural zeitgeist 11 years later, which perhaps can't be argued for other recently ended franchises. On The Walking Dead's over a decade of content, we've seen 4 completely unique showrunners, over 150 episodes and 11 seasons, all of which have had their own arcs, storylines and plot threads. So, if we had to decide, what is the best one? Before we start, let's categorise what we mean by an arc. An arc is a self-contained storyline including core characters, locations, antagonists and themes, sometimes synonymous with a season, like Season 2 being exclusively set on the farm, but sometimes it could last longer, for example the Governor Arc, which lasted Seasons 3 to 4, or the Saviour Arc, which went all the way from Season 6 to Season 8. You could have a smaller arc, for example the Hospital Arc of Season 5, which only lasted 4 episodes. We will allow splitting an arc into multiple parts, so for example you could take Season 8's All-Out War as an individual arc within a bigger whole, but what we won't allow is sporadically placed plot lines, like the helicopter that shows up at random points during Seasons 8 and 9. Now that we've got that out of the way, let me go to 2 honourable mentions before we deep dive into the topic of the video. The first honourable mention goes to the Whisperer arc, lasting Seasons 9 and 10. With the show on a downward spiral, introducing the new antagonistic group and having yet another war in 3 years was sure to ruffle some feathers, but the way it was paced, the deaths and the character moments all ensured it stayed fresh, unique and exciting. Once again I find myself complimenting the latest showrunner Angela Kang, who's managed in my eyes to find the perfect balance between adapting the comics and serving up their own shocking twists on the source material. The second honourable mention I have is the Alexandria Arc, which depending on how you interpret it, lasts either to the back half of Season 5 or extends to the first half of Season 6. There is a little overlap between this arc and some other stories. Either way, after some time on the road really solidified the core group to viewers in the highest rated season, Season 5, the group found themselves living amongst a community far more similar to the old ways than any the group were prepared for. This arc was the ultimate payout for all their time on the road, and in Season 5, Scott Gimple turned this perfectly acceptable arc from the comics into something really special. Andrew Lincoln gets some of his best acting ever in this arc, and seeing him so out of place and slowly unravelling as he struggles to adapt is simply breathtaking. It's also the place where we get some great moments for the other cast members, especially Carol, Glenn, Sasha and Gabriel. Now onto the main event. Season 9, the Bridge Arc. Of course, I'm not trying to tease you, it's in the thumbnail and the title, but I think it's important to get some context to appreciate and understand the genius of this arc more fully. Picture this, it's 2018 and the big war between the saviours and the survivors is over, and the viewers are dropping. The war did not hit as hard as the network would have liked, and in the last 2 seasons, they're considered a drop in quality, especially after the infamous Season 7 premiere put off many viewers. You've just killed off Carl, a controversial move to say the least, and now the core cast's 8-season contract is over and Andrew Lincoln is moving on and leaving the show. Not to mention negotiations fell through with Lauren Cohan, who is to be temporarily written out of the show. As if that wasn't enough, the actors for Enid, Gregory and Jesus are moving on. Morgan and Dwight have been moved onto new projects and Michonne has agreed to leave the next season. Oh, and you have a new showrunner, as Scott Gimple moves upwards to oversee the changes of showrunners for 2 shows simultaneously, while also setting up more spin-offs and future projects. And that's just the behind the scenes side of things. From a story point of view, new showrunner Angela Kang had been left with only 5 episodes with Andrew Lincoln, a shoehorn plot twist featuring Maggie, Jesus and Daryl from the end of Season 8, and a number of characters and plot threads left untied, like the completely underused Oceanside, Jadis, a completely original characters with no ties to the rest of the cast. There's also a character problem. Having lost Glenn, Abraham, Sasha and Carl in just 2 years, and now with a fresh horde of leavers coming, you'll have to rely more on the secondary cast, who are not as liked by the fandom. Season 7 and 8 gave us pretty unlikable arcs for Eugene, Tara, Rosita, and most importantly Daryl, who's supposed to be the new lead for the show. With so much stacked against the new showrunner Angela Kang, the series was doomed to fail, and the ratings would continue to sink. My confidence was low. Seriously, the first video on this channel is a message directly to Angela Kang with some suggestions on how she fixed the show. And yet, they made the bridge arc, lasting a mere 5 episodes from 901 to 905. These episodes see us skip a year and a half forward, where Rick is trying to hold together the 5 communities as food is scarce, the Saviors are still facing reparations for the war, and the decision to not kill Negan still remains a controversial one. This arc is the best arc of the show because of its ability to tell such a comprehensive story in such a short time with no filler, and to successfully juggle every active plot thread, all building towards a killer finale that would forever change the show. With Rick leaving, the question that presides over the writers must have been, how do we make Rick's farewell the best it could be? And the answer to this is to take the character back to his roots. Rick is in full sheriff mode here, and by trying to protect the peace and solve a murder, it's the ultimate way to show Rick's unique skills, get him in a variety of places and speaking to a variety of people, and ultimately show the character at the best he can be. Determined, optimistic, yet brutal and hard when he needs to be. By simply letting Rick weave in and out of the story, the arc is all about community, and yet he's always at the centre of it. The construction of the bridge and the mystery of the helicopter play out side by side as dual mysteries, perfectly tangling together in episode 3 when Rick suspects that Anne may have something to do with the murders. The two stories then feel like they're diverging again, but just when you think Rick is dead, the A and B plot, no pun intended, converge together out of nowhere. It's so shocking, yet it makes perfect sense that these two stories would climax at the same time. Angela Kang manages to use the helicopter story to the show's advantage by taking the vague, almost impromptu nature of its appearances in season 8 and turning it into a compelling mystery. The work done towards humanising Anne goes a long way, and her relationship with Gabriel was the perfect way to rise his character into the limelight while also keeping the focus on her and the core mystery. Given Anne/Jadis is probably one of the worst characters the show ever had during seasons 7 and 8, I was genuinely really sad to see her leave the show, as we had just begun to see under the surface. Plus, her painting pictures of Maggie's family is fantastic. Speaking of Maggie, core to the story of the arc's central question, can the communities get along, is Maggie and her plan to kill Negan. It's an iconic moment in the show and a cornerstone of Maggie's story and personality. Angela Kang managed to turn the tacked-on twist ending of season 8 and make sense of it, while also giving Maggie, Daryl and Jesus all different views and motivations surrounding the same topic. The way that Maggie and Daryl witness Arat's death is probably one of the most underrated moments of the entire show, and seeing Jesus stand up to Maggie really showcased the growth in his character. Like previously mentioned, Rosita, Eugene and Tara all had pretty hot-headed arcs during the Savior War, so their very light inclusion in this arc feels very purposeful to almost reset them, their personalities and how we as viewers should treat them. Eugene is back to being his smart and resourceful self, Rosita is an all-around action hero, and Tara is a fun-loving wildcard. To keep them all on the back burner was a smart move. Having the Oceanside be the villains of this arc is perhaps the most genius reveal of the entire 5-episode run. It's probably the most important thing the Oceanside has ever done, after practically sitting out of 2 entire seasons of the show. Seeing them be revealed to be the killers was both a shock and understandable, and you get to feel their motivations. Plus, it's always nice when a murder mystery has clues we can actually follow. In hindsight, you can see the clues as clear as day, and the murder weapon is highlighted in the background quite a few times, which I think is cool to see a writing team that respect the audience to pick up on clues like this. To think that seasons 7 and 8 didn't have the confidence to have more than one group per episode really shows how far we've come. Back at Alexandria, Michonne gets a great storyline too that really feels right for her character. She balances between being the leader she wants to be and the killer she needs to be. Seeing the book delivered by Georgie play into the plot is great, as she felt a little out of place in season 8, and the show managed to make a great use of the character Georgie later down the line, despite her not appearing. Michonne has often been an underused character in seasons 6, 7 and 8, and I think this arc finally makes her step out and go beyond just being Rick's girlfriend and the lady with the sword, which I think the show eventually boiled her down to. Daryl and Carol also have great new directions to head in. Carol is a caregiver again, this time to Henry, the troublesome younger brother of Benjamin, and is in a budding relationship with Ezekiel, trying desperately to move on from the past and the violence it brings. Daryl is very much on the opposite side of that. He's trying to make peace with the war, but by trying to honour Rick and Carl by being as involved as he can with the Saviours, Daryl is unable to give up on the sins of the past. The two find themselves on very opposite journeys, and by the end of Season 9 find themselves swapping places, with one embracing community while the other one gives back into hate. Outside of the core cast, some of the side characters get absolutely amazing little stories to tell, alongside significant changes for their characters. Enid begins as a nurse and is forced to step up when she has to amputate the arm of Aaron. Alden plays a pivotal role in keeping the peace between the Saviours and the other communities, and I personally believe this is the best use of his character they've ever had in the show. Some of the minor characters like Beatrice, Arat, Justin and DJ and others get lots to say and their own opinions, which really makes the world feel fleshed out and the viewers rewarded for keeping up with such a large cast. The theme of the season is definitely being able to move on from our past, but it's all about people and how they can be the ultimate resource. Given the deaths of Justin, Gregory and Ken all fuel the season in a domino-like effect, it really puts the focus on people being the most important cornerstone of this new community, as well as focusing on how people, or just one person, can tear down all the progress that's made. We also get a few introductions in this arc too, namely Tammy Rose and Earl Sutton, who play pivotal roles in the show and go through great character changes in such a short time, serving as victims, antagonists and later allies to Maggie in the Hilltop. We also get Marco, who's been a mainstay of the show for the last 2 seasons. One of the great things about this arc is just how much the past matters, and how many old characters get shoutouts, some for the first time in years. Glenn, Abraham, Carl, Merle, Morgan, Laurie, Beth, Ed, and of course the 3 characters we see in 905. Talking of, the finale to this arc is pretty fantastic. Only 5 episodes in, we get one of the most ambitious and finale-esque episodes the show has ever done, and it's completely unpredictable. The Walking Dead fandom is usually pretty quick to leak information or guess theories correctly, but going into Rick's last episode, all cards were still on the table, and the way the writers managed to weave the helicopter mystery with Rick's last episodes without giving away the final twist was masterful. While the final episode may not have the greatest CGI in some places, thematically it wraps up the conflict extremely well, and seeing old characters in Rick's hallucinations is amazing. Shane and Rick's conversation is extremely well written, as it mixes their friendship, rivalry and twisted respect to shape something both nostalgic of the earlier seasons while also new. Herschel's cameo is great, especially given the real life death of Scott Wilson just days before the season began. Sasha's hits the least hard for me despite my love for the character, and I imagine this cameo was likely saved or written for another character like Glenn, who didn't agree to film. Still, as a character who saved themselves for their found family, Sasha's inclusion makes perfect narrative sense. It all leads towards the explosive finale, and I think the ending represents the spark of hope that the characters hold on to, while also being the core drive for the rest of the season, and what the future communities must overcome. Say what you will about the decision to save Rick and have him show up in the future movies. I think him living was the right choice regardless of whether we ever saw him again or not. And the message of community, the future and family are weaved so expertly through the story that in my mind this is the perfect arc of The Walking Dead. The lack of villains puts the focus on each other, and by respecting its characters, community and history, I think Angela Kang finally made a season that felt on par with the time and the effort its viewers had put into the show. As the first arc in the fantastic Season 9, this was about as good as a season or a showrunner could begin. Of course, no matter how good 905 was going to be, the fact that the lead of the show was leaving meant that some viewers were going to be upset or stop watching no matter the quality of the episode. The writers must have known this, so they developed not 1 but 2 great hooks to keep the viewers on board for the rest of the season. The implications of the bridge aside, the Maggie and Negan encounter dramatically changes his role in the show, and the writers were smart to keep Negan quite literally out of the limelight until this confrontation. Not only did this confrontation happen a lot sooner than anyone could have anticipated, but the reveal that Negan is a broken man is one that sets up his arc going forward and presents a significant change to the status quo of his character so early into the season. And if that wasn't enough, the end reveal of 5 brand new characters makes sure that viewers are confident with the cast dynamics and that the plot will keep moving forward in new and interesting ways. As Magnus Group are introduced, it's clear Angela Kang has more up her sleeve for them than simply adapting the characters, who are quite honestly pretty one-note in the comics. And finally, Magnus Group encounter a grown-up Judith, the ultimate cliffhanger to make sure viewers come back after Rick's departure, and a thematic way to tie off the ideas of family, hope, community, and the future, all with one simple reveal. Perfection. So that's some of my thoughts on the Bridge arc and why it's the best. I'd love to get into some more stuff, like the scene of Carol and Daryl talking in episode 1, this scene with Rick and Judith's last day, or break down some of the various nods to the fallen characters in 905. But we'll leave it there for now. Let me know what your favourite arcs for the show were, and I'll be sure to get back to you. Peace. Because I flow.